Hello, welcome to the English News Service with the segment, the Talking Point segment today. Good afternoon. Senior government officials from ASEAN member states and the ASEAN Secretariat, experts from ASEAN Research Institute and civil society, and senior officials from the United Nations have come together in Jakarta to discuss conflict prevention and the prevention of violent extremism in the ASEAN region. And to discuss more on this issue, we will be speaking with Dr.Jehangir, Director of UN Counter-Terrorism Center, Department of Political Affairs, United Nations Secretariat. Good afternoon, Dr. Khan.
How are you?
First of all, welcome to Indonesia.
Thank you.
Yeah. About the event held in Jakarta, the UN ASEAN Regional Dialogue on preventing violent extremism, what are the major issues that were discussed?
Well, violent extremism is now a global threat. We see that there are today terrorists, foreign terrorist fighters from more than 100 countries, unfortunately including from this region, from the ASEAN region, who have gone in particular to Iraq and Syria. And so this is a global threat. And therefore, there is an urgent need for international cooperation to address the growing threat, not only of terrorism, but of violent extremism that is fueling terrorism. And so it was good to see that all the ASEAN countries here in Jakarta, hosted by the Indonesian government, are meeting to look at how can all the ASEAN countries cooperate with each other and with the United Nations and the international community to address this growing threat in a way that could be helpful for these countries in addressing this challenge, which, as I said, is a global challenge.
It's a global challenge, it's a global threat.
Yes.
What is the clear definitions of extremism, violent extremism that was we as the society need to understand?
Well, you know, we have to be humble. As United Nations, we have been careful not to define violent extremism in any specific way. You know, until today, there is no agreed definition amongst governments of what terrorism is, because of this old adage that one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. So we avoided getting into definitional issues, and really the whole purpose of this conference was really to focus on prevention, to address what we call the drivers of violent extremism. What are the push and pull factors that drive individuals to become violent extremists? Well, first of all, to become extremists, then violent, and then to become terrorists. And so it's a very practical approach, because if we really want to prevent, we have to also understand together in a national and regional context what are those factors. And so this conference was also to hear from the ASEAN countries, including Indonesia, their national experiences. It's not for the UN, for us to come from New York to tell you in this region what are the factors. I think we have to have a two-way dialogue, and we have to be very humble to understand that it is in a national and local context that those factors are taking place.
Yeah, you know, for Indonesia, we, as you know, that for the past several years, we have had the problems of radicalization, recruitment and mobilization of individuals into terrorist groups and becoming foreign terrorist fighters. What do you think on this?
Well, you know, Indonesia is not unique in that context. As I said, there are more than 100 countries that are affected by that, and this is because increasingly we find young people. It's nearly always young people. You know, the world today has the largest population of young people in the history of mankind. 1.8 billion people are in the age group of 16 to 24. And in many countries, as I'm sure here in Indonesia also, a very large percentage of the population are young. And so they are easily susceptible, particularly through this new threat, which is the social media. This is the instrument through which young people are gaining their education. It's not just in the school, it's not just at home, but mostly through the social media. And this is both a positive tool and a negative tool. So we are particularly focusing. Youth is a very important focus of how both the negative violent extremists are preying on them through social media to recruit them, but also it's an opportunity for governments to look at how can we better address the needs and concerns of young people. Because let's face it, most young people do not become terrorists. It's a very small minority, including in this country. And we need to recognize the positive, not just the negative.
Yeah, between violent extremism and terrorism? Are there any explicit link?
Well, yes and no. In fact, what we are looking at is what are the factors, and that was one of the focuses of this conference, is, you know, the radicalization process is not a simple straight line, and also it involves a number of what we call push and pull factors. Some of them, when we talk about push factors, are really factors that are in the political environment or the socio-economic environment. You know, there could be a number of factors which are related to the context. And then there's the pull, like social media, where the young people are radicalized to the media, so they're being pulled by the terrorists. So one is the push and pull factors, and there's also a psychological aspect, because some individuals are radicalized, some of them may become criminals, some of them may become violent extremists. So we have to be very careful to look at what is the empirical evidence. So one of the things the United Nations is doing, my UN Counterterrorism Center is doing right now, is surveying terrorists who have returned home and trying to understand, sitting down to them, what were the factors that motivated them to go, because there is no straight answer to that. No one country has a magic bullet to know what makes an individual suddenly twist and become a terrorist or a criminal, just a common criminal, you know. And so, because if we're going to have effective medicine, we have to diagnose the problem properly. And right now, sitting down with the governments of this region, we're trying to diagnose the problem before we put the medicine, because sometimes the medicine can kill the patient also. And we have seen this recently. And so one of the focus right now is not just to give medicine, which is military action or security responses, but to see, can we develop more effective medicines that doesn't then require military responses that sometimes can complicate the situation.
So you're saying that there is we need to address root causes.
Yes.
Are there the causes similar to any ASEAN regions?
You know, this issue of root causes, again, linked to push and pull factors. There's no question that there are factors that are conducive to terrorism. And here, one of the things we have found that societies, why is ASEAN better prepared to deal with terrorism? I can tell you that actually ASEAN is doing better than most regions. Why? Because this region has democratic governance. You have a respect for human rights and the rule of law. No political system in any country is perfect, we know that. But there is a political commitment in this country and in the neighboring countries. I think today you do not have any dictatorship in ASEAN anymore. You have all countries striving for democratic governance. That provides space for young people to participate. What we have to look at is how can we improve that environment so that they have a stake in the future. Ultimately, this is also a political challenge. It's a developmental challenge. It's a social challenge. It's a human rights challenge. And we are taking an inclusive approach. We're talking about all of government approach, all of society approach, and all of UN approach.
Yeah. Indonesia is still developing middle-income country.
Yes.
The number of unemployment is rising.
Yes.
People are still struggling to make ends meet. Is this a significant challenge, this insecurity? Is this a challenge?
Well, again, of course, for any developing country, Indonesia is a very big country. You have over 200 million people, and you know, even the most advanced countries, if I may say so, we see also are facing similar challenges. The richest and most powerful countries are also facing these challenges. So it's not just a factor of development. As I explained, you know, we find in some cases that young people who are even educated, who are doctors and lawyers and engineers, are joining. And so it's not just a factor of the economic factor. It is a factor, but it's not the only reason. I do think that certainly we need, and as the United Nations, to support, and that's one of the reasons why we had this conference. We want to see how can the United Nations support countries of this region to better harness your development potential, to have a better impact, to prevent violent extremism through development and other means.
Mr. Khan, a few days ago, we had a major demonstration of thousands of Muslims from various organizations. The rally triggered by the blasphemy allegedly done by the Jakarta governor, and who is a non-Muslim and a Chinese ethnic. What they want is no discrimination in the eyes of the law. Do you think this can be a cause of extremist violence?
Well, I cannot comment on the domestic situation of Indonesia because this is a sensitive matter, and of course, to full respect as a United Nations official, we do not comment on the internal situation of any country. But what I can say to you is that there is, as I said earlier, because this is a democracy, you have many different political parties. There's an inclusive process. This is always a positive aspect to prevent radicalization and violent extremism. So my answer to you would be that there is great potential in this country because you have dialogue, because you have inclusive politics, that there's an opportunity to hopefully address this challenge in a way that would prevent escalation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Khan, for your time.
My pleasure, and wish Indonesia all the very best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.